Good morning and welcome to all of you who have tuned in to today's episode of Leave It to the Experts. It is our first episode in calendar year 2024. For those of you who have shared your time, shared your interest to perhaps watch some of the previous episodes, welcome back. As you can see from my attire today, I'm certainly dressed for this crazy, very crazy start of the winter year here where I'm at in 2024. As I had a text conversation with some of my family members who live in other parts of the US, warmer climates. I'm so jealous. Grace, my sister. It is what it is. So with all of that said, let me set the tone for today's episode. For those of you who are watching this as a live stream, or for those of you who are watching this on demand as a recording, today's episode is something that I feel many of us, whether it be ourselves or the ones close to us, can benefit hearing from my guest today. It is that of how do you finance either planning ahead or you're in the middle of it? How do you deal with the financial solutions of earning your higher education degree, your college degree, your advanced degree? My guest today, Zach, is a financial aid counselor. And I came to know him within the past 60 days. After I got to know him, I just thought, oh my gosh, Zach, you bring such a comprehensive set of knowledge and experience that I want to share your information and share you with all of my other relationships. So with that said, with that simple introduction, let's bring Zach into the room.
Hey everybody.
Good morning to you, Zach.
Good morning. And I'm in Chicago and I don't have my Chicago coat on, but it is cold here too.
Yes, it is cold. Today, the start of maybe the thawing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll call it the thawing. I do have my winter coat. You look very warm and I myself am comfortable, but it has been a rough week.
It has been a rough week. Mother Nature has been quite mad at us this year.
Yes.
So, Zach, let's start off with I shared with my audience a brief description of what you do. And certainly, I didn't do enough justice to introduce you. So why don't you lead off with, this is to warm you up, lead off with describing more in detail, high level, what you do.
Yes, I would love to. To maybe give you a little background, my time in financial aid started when I was in college as an undergrad student, and I was trying to do a internship back at the time when I was doing them. Most commonly, they were unpaid. I believe that has now changed over the past 15 years since I was in college, where many of them are now paid. But at the time, they were unpaid, and not only were they unpaid, but you had to find a way to fund these internships. And so at the time, I applied for financial aid thinking I got to get some support to go do this unpaid internship because it's part of this journey that I'm on to get my degree. And so that was the start of my financial aid experience.
Wow.
Now, most of the time, what I have found when I meet other financial aid professionals is that they kind of stumble into financial aid because they were a user of financial aid in the first place in their undergrad degree or their associate's degree or whatever educational experience they have. And so that was very much my journey. I ended up working at the college that I graduated from in the financial aid office, and I got to learn more about the immediate role of financial aid, which, just some background, financial aid consists of a lot of different types of funding. I think some people maybe say financial aid thinking of loans or financial aid thinking of grants or scholarships, but a lot of stuff goes into that umbrella term.
Got it.
But in any case, I got to see the day-to-day use of financial aid there. And now I have started to since pan back out into the greater lifespan of financial aid because, you have implications that you touched on where you can be thinking about strategizing in terms of how to use financial aid all the way from when your child is born. And for anybody who uses educational loans, that process of optimizing financial aid extends after the degree. So now my exposure and my role in helping families is really much more, it's panned out across the lifespan. And I just really want to help people understand the journey and how to optimize and what to be thinking about. And that's where I really find my fulfillment as a financial aid educator or a counselor.
Wow. And you touched upon the one word that I think is so key and apropos for, I think, all of the stakeholders of financial aid. It's a journey.
It's a journey.
And like any journey, you got to have a plan.
Totally.
You got to have, hopefully, the right plan with the right people guiding you. And that's why, audience members, that's why I thought, Zach, would you be kind enough to share your time with as large of an audience that we both share, because this information is so important. Why? Because college education, whether you're going to Ivy League or wherever, it's gotten so expensive,
Yes.
right? So let's start off our conversation today for the obvious, for the parents of young children, high school age children. What should they know today, Zach?
A couple things that I think are critical, and I just say this thinking of some, I don't want to label it objections with a negative light, but I think sometimes there are myths with financial aid that saving money, putting money into some kind of let's say, for example, a 529 plan or any kind of an asset vehicle, saving money will reduce that family and that student's chances for financial aid. I hear that a lot, so I don't know where the myth comes from. Technically, if you look at it from a very technical perspective, it could be true. What I worry about, though, is that the benefit of saving anything you can in any amount is going to, in my opinion, far outweigh the reciprocal financial aid you may get from having assets of some amount that you can tap into to help fund college. I think a family that, for instance, maybe says, hey, instead of saving $100 a month from the time our child is 5 until they're getting ready to go to college in some way, shape, or form, I think there's a lot of loss there and very small gain if you look at the big picture. So I say that because I think any amount that can be saved is helpful. I think if you're unsure how to consider starting saving or how the financial aid process works, I think it's never too late to start learning. And I think the best way to make decisions that work for you as an individual is to understand, to learn. So the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to start saving and don't be afraid to start learning. I think the more you can understand, the better off you're going to be. And those are maybe the two things that I would say to start. I would suggest that families start thinking about sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and like any financial goal or the use of financial instruments, spot on. The earlier you start the plan, the earlier you commit to your plan, the better. That's what I'm hearing.
Completely. And I'll pick on myself here. It's a good chance for me to do so. You might have heard in my recap, I wasn't thinking of financial aid. I wasn't using it until I realized I had to do an unpaid internship and I needed help getting there. So I'm very much a poster child of what not to do because I should have been learning years in advance of actually submitting the FAFSA and trying to pursue financial aid when I did. And so I can say that having gone through the experience of not optimizing, and I firmly believe that starting with learning and saving at some point early, whenever it makes sense in the family's budget, is going to be a good thing. And hopefully you've got people. I always say find financial aid friends, because I think hopefully you can find people that can help guide those decisions and refine them. But I think if you're just looking for one step to take away from today, it's start learning and start saving, and that's a great win.
And the second is find a financial aid friend, and that's why you're here. Thank you thank you for sharing that with us as an obvious next step. So what I think I heard from you is for those parents of young children, high school age children about to flip the switch to the next chapter, I think what you're saying is the myth is that if you make too much money, you don't qualify. That's a myth, right?
Totally.
Bingo. All right. And I'm going to lean in here and say this. Amongst my friends, I have several to many friends who are not your typical, stereotypical household, where it's two parents, dual income earners. I've got a lot of friends right now that are single parent, single income earner, some that are medium to high income, and others that are on the opposing end. So same story. Do not hang on to the myth that given whatever upside you have or speed bump in front of you, financial aid is in front of you. There's many solutions.
Totally. And another example you could even use to illustrate where this general myth starts to have some cracks, I think, is that even for high earning families, again, one of the themes I mentioned earlier was that financial aid is a very broad word. I think the association many people have with it is that it's only meant to be a tool for individuals or families from low incomes. But financial aid includes scholarships, and
Right.
scholarships are traditionally a merit-based type of resource, which doesn't
Right.
have anything to do with income or savings or assets. And so a part of this idea of maximizing financial aid, it pertains exactly to high income households, because most high income households are still going to say, well, we still want a fair shot at scholarships. And so I think you're spot on. I think trying to embrace this word as a positive thing to learn about, regardless of your financial background and means, is a good thing.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Yep.
And as I'm talking to you, my nieces and nephews on my wife's side of the family, um, they are, all three of them are in higher, college education or pursuing advanced degrees.
Awesome.
So by all means, after we finish today's episode, by the way, if you're not watching today, family members, I will make sure I text it to you.
Yes.
Let's now
send
move.
it out.
Yeah, I'll send it out. Make sure they know you.
Yeah.
Let's now move our conversation to the next stakeholder of financial aid, and that would be the students, the young adults who now have benefited from the different flavors of financial aid. What should they know as they are about to earn that degree? They're going to bust into the world like you, like me, as a income wage earner. What advice do you have for them?
Yes. In college, if a student, let's say we're talking to a student who's just started their first year, they finished their first semester, or they're all the way through until more close to the end of their program, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year or more advanced program. In any case, I think if the student is in that journey somewhere, my suggestion is spend a couple hours, learn about financial aid. If you feel like it's this mystery, when I was a financial aid director, the number of students that would come through and I think kind of went through the habits or the behavior, they submitted a FAFSA, they did the actions without really understanding them. The percentage of students who would approach financial aid that way was quite high. I think there's always room to optimize. So if you're in the weeds right now of pursuing your degree and you feel like financial aid, like there's a gap, you're doing the behavior, but you're not understanding how it fits into this bigger picture, certainly seek out information, find financial aid friends. I think that will be a rewarding connection for you. The other thing I would say is if you're closer to the end, my belief is that if I even look at the past 3 years in the financial aid student loan situation, where a graduate may be saying, hey, I'm finishing my degree, I got to start repaying my loans, there has been some monumental and frequent changes to the rules and the norms
I know.
every 6 months. And so what I would encourage you to recognize is that maybe things will stabilize over the next year or 2 years or 5 years. But I think more now than ever, where you could graduate and set up an automatic payment plan and just coast until the loans were gone, I think it's worth trying to have some way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in this realm, because there's new changes, there's new proposals, there's new legislation. There's In June of last year, we had this. Early in June, we thought we were potentially going to get $10,000 to $20,000 of forgiveness. By the end of the month, that was squashed, but President Biden created the SAVE plan, and that was a new plan that had never been created before. So just in 1 month alone, we had so much going on, and I think that's a good example of why student loan management, if you're kind of nearing the end of your degree, is perhaps going to be more time intensive than it may have been 10 years ago when I finished college or more. So just maybe keep that perspective in mind as you progress, and that's maybe my suggestion for that stage of the financial aid user.
Yeah. And going off on a slight tangent, but certainly to the storyboard of our conversation, I came upon this statistic recently, and that is at least 22% of millennials are carrying student loan debt of $50,000 or more. And that has created, it's kind of natural, it's kind of created this perception amongst enough families, enough college, degree earners. The $1 million question is, well, is it worth it, right? And in my business, as you get a sense of what I do, student loan debt is one of the largest non-housing debt that can be what I would simply call today a speed bump. Yep. That prevents that individual, that young household, to move forward through their next life events. Bingo. You agree with that, right?
Completely agree. I was even thinking that when you were sharing that you're going to get underwritten for a home loan, and right. The student debt payments, especially now that it started out, direct impact in those decisions and the amount you can borrow and all of that. I think it all relates to the bigger picture.
Well, what's your opinion, your personal opinion and or professional, about managing student loan debt, the payment of it, like income-based repayment, or taking advantage of like the forbearance when it was available? Can you lean in and share your thoughts around that?
Yes. I shy away from forming opinions about whether or not I think the programs are good or they're meeting their intended benefits or things like that. I do try to wrap my mind around what exists today and how can a borrower take maximum advantage of whatever exists today. And so I do think, depending on the scenario, that for instance, that 3-year pause we had, if a borrower was in a role or had an income level where they maybe couldn't count on forgiveness because their income was high in relation to their debt load, right, I think that was a beautiful situation for them financially, because they had no interest and 100% of whatever they paid was going to go toward the principal and the payoff. A luxury that we don't necessarily have anymore since September. And so I think from that profile of a borrower, it was a big win. I think the other profile of borrowers who are perhaps now that we've had some time are finding that this was perhaps quite valuable is that for the borrowers that maybe borrowed a large amount in relation to their income, that pause, if they were pursuing some kind of a forgiveness program, was still moving them toward forgiveness, even though they weren't having to make a payment. And so it really was sort of a nice culmination for them. Take a resident, for example, who's going through they're pursuing some kind of a degree in the medical field. They may right. have a very high debt load compared to what they earned during residency. Right. And if they didn't have to make payments for 4 years, but they could qualify for that progress to be counted toward 10-year public service loan forgiveness, that is a monumental win.
It is.
On behalf of the borrowers, I think that was a really, really luxurious period of time. And I hope many of the listeners feel like, oh, I got some benefit from it, because I see a lot of the benefit on the backside myself when I'm counseling folks and things like that.
Thank you for sharing that very specific example, Zach. Within my family, I've got a niece who is I think she's a third year resident in medical
Wonderful.
school. And I know, I have a feeling that, a lot of what we're talking about is, in her forefront, right? Thinking
Relevant.
about, hey, how do I move through my next chapters and life events? And then beyond
Bingo.
my own, yeah, beyond my own family, I've got enough friends whose adult children are pursuing those advanced degrees in various aspects of the medical field. So what you just dropped as great words of advice, words of motivation.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for
Yes.
doing that.
And
Let's now.
I might pan out just briefly if I can to
Sure.
anybody who has the potential to work in a commonly nonprofit type of career field, hospitals, healthcare systems. I know there's some complexity in certain states with who technically employs, California as an example, who
Sure.
employs the doctor, for instance, and who they might be associated with on their tax ID. But in any case, or teachers or psychologists or counselors, if the debt load that is needed to obtain that degree is high in relation to the income,
Right.
that starts to create a situation where some of these public service programs are so valuable. And so I always encourage folks who are getting ready to graduate from one of those programs to make sure they're considering that amongst their decisions on where they're working and what their 10-year plan looks like and things like that, because I think it does. You want to optimize early so that you have the nicest path instead of saying I'm 5 years into repayment and now I got 5 years of time that I've wasted or I've used in a less than ideal way or something like that. So
True.
for your niece in the program, encourage her to meet with somebody in the financial aid office or a financial aid friend when she gets closer to graduation.
Yeah. Time, a cliche, time is precious,
It's
and
so
time
precious.
is the only thing that you and I really control ourselves to a degree.
Totally. Totally.
Um, as we wrap up today's episode, can you lean in and share your thoughts on, you touched upon it, but can you share your thoughts on loan forgiveness and maybe even touch on, right? We'll tease the audience,
Yes.
especially the executives, the business owners of businesses who might want to create some incentivizing solution for their employees, new employees who are carrying student loan. So let's talk about student loan forgiveness. What are your thoughts around that? How can
Bingo.
employers, executives help?
Yes, yes. What I think there's a lot of knowledge about student loans. And I think if I cycle back to one of the comments you made about the percentage of even millennials, which is the generation that I am a member of, and if you then pan down, you've got one or two generations below millennials now
Right.
that have student loans, and that I believe, at least based on the conversations I have every day, they're craving somebody to really help them make sense of it all. You've got 10 years of terminology and processes and changes. It's a lot. And
Yes.
so I think if you're an employer or you have someone who's in a position who is able to influence or provide value to their employees, what I might encourage you to be thinking about is, are there organizations that can help bring this knowledge into your institution as a benefit for the employees? Because I just see these light bulbs going off when people finally understand. And it for me, it's really rewarding personally. I have to believe these employees are also thriving and loving their organizations for providing that knowledge, because it's desperately needed. So I suppose that might be, depending on the role of who's listening, if you've got a chance to look for those types of companies and organizations that have that knowledge and can bring it to your employees, I think that's an amazing win. Because in my ideal world, in Zach's ideal world, the colleges would have the expertise to really help on repayment.
Right.
But speaking from somebody who's worked in a college, a lot of our day-to-day administration is focused on the students in front of us and running the financial aid office in the way that it needs to be run, rather than helping the graduates who are 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years out maximize repayment. So I
Right.
do think where employers can pick up that void it creates an awesome win-win opportunity.
I love that. And as part of our conversation today, this is ad lib, everyone. I'm going to drop in a call to action here. For those of you who have and will have watched this recording, if you happen to be a business owner, an executive of your company, and you're wanting to attract your next set of employees who will produce great outcomes for you, and you're wanting to lean in to help Zach and myself solve this very daunting problem at times,
Yes,
please drop a comment on social platforms wherever you are watching this content. So as we wrap up today's episode with my guest and new friend, Zach, for those of you who've enjoyed this content today, if you happen to know someone that you trust who is an expert in a subject matter in their industry or field, I welcome your help to connect me to that individual so that we can have that person in an upcoming episode of Leave It to the Expert. How can you get in touch with me? Real simple. Simply scan the QR code and I will be glad to start a conversation to make sure that we are a great fit together to have you come on board, just like Zach, to talk about a topic that's passionate for you and, of course, a big benefit to our audience members. So, Zach, as we wrap up, my first comment is thank you for sharing your time with me in the comfort and warmth of your home. Thank you for doing that. And what I love to do, this is my ask, is maybe as we go forward, I may just reach out to you and ask you to come back and do another recurring guest appearance, because this topic that we're talking about, it doesn't go away.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And you're right. When you parallel out, I like talking to borrowers because student loans are fun for me to talk about and journey. It parallels into so many other goals, the home buying, the car buying, retirement savings. So I think you're right. It's valuable no matter where you're at. And I'm a big fan of it. And I'm always happy to join you.
All right. And as I wrap up, for those of you who need to, sooner than later, maybe right now, today, who need to find Zach, it's real simple. You have his contact information, his name here in this episode. Google search. He's the one and only Zachery Gries. So it's easy to find him. So
I try to be active on LinkedIn. Find me there if you'd like, and I'm always happy to help and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zach, thank you for sharing your time with us. Audience members, thank you for sharing your time with me and Zach. And until we see each other in the next episode of Leave It to the Experts.